Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Welcome to the Sunday edition of the iWrite Radio podcast, stroke videocast. I don't know where Jimmy is today. I have a sneaky feeling he might have gone for a pint yesterday and might be lying in a mouldering heap recovering. But I've got Stuart Lockhead with me.
Hello there. Can you actually hear me?
Yeah, I can.
It's just that I'm sitting here staring at the picture of myself with a hand in the sky. Whoops. Can you see it there? Or is it just me?
Just you, mate. You're going off your head.
No, I haven't got on my heap. As I say, the Zoom that we were using updated half an hour ago or an hour ago. And this is possibly one of those new features.
Hand of God.
It being Sunday, it would be the hand of God.
Now you've just driven every thought I had out of my head.
Well, we've got DRoss, which was the main topic, wasn't it?
Douglas Ross made a speech to the Tory Conference that we're going to chat about. I suppose we have to mention Margaret Ferrier, the Marr show, which I watched, but I believe you gave up.
It actually makes me ill. I get my blood pressure goes up. I start shouting at the TV watching shows like that. He didn't interrupt. He let Boris go on and on, and the longer he went on, the angrier I got. Come on, I've got a bad heart, Norrie.
Well, Brewer didn't come on till 1:15, and as we broadcast at 1:30, we kind of ignored that as well because it would be much of the same. What I will say, quite interesting about Marr, they had their Labour apparatchik on to begin with, and he made an attempt to have a pop at Margaret Ferrier, referring to her as an SNP MP. Obviously had a speech already to make about how terrible it all was, and Marr cut him off. And that was the only mention on Marr of Margaret Ferrier. And I would suggest there's a reason for that. Because if you're going to criticise her, you cannot ignore the fact that both Ian Blackford and Nicola Sturgeon have said she should resign.
Well, this is the thing. I don't know what Boris was saying today, but yesterday when he was quizzed about the Margaret Ferrier situation, he refused to say that she should resign from her as an MP, and he was challenged on that. He said he was accused of not demanding that she resign as an MP because of the Dominic Cummings situation, which he pretended. Oh no, he said.
And well, effectively, he said that's history. Yeah. I'm a bit disappointed in her. I'm actually very pleased with the way every SNP spokesperson I've heard on this subject has said she should go, because she should go.
Well, yes, but all the same, she made a terrible mistake. But
well, I mean, she didn't make one mistake, Stuart. She knew there was a possibility that she had the disease. That's why she went for the test. She should have been self-isolating at that point. To then travel to London,
yeah, I know,
only to get a positive and go into the House of Commons and all the rest of it. Although I believe there has only been one person who falls into the contact category being traced.
Right.
It could have been, well, it could have been horrendous. And it was then to travel back, knowing she was positive. I'm sorry, on every level, it was rank stupidity.
Well, okay, but I just feel sorry for the woman.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't. She should have known better. And if it was born out of ignorance, she's not doing her job.
The trouble is, the word misogyny comes into mind. She's a woman. She's a working class woman. I don't know much else about her, but these aspects make it makes it a bit uncomfortable to watch her pile on.
Well, I've no discomfort in at all. Anybody that called for Dominic Cummings to go should be calling for her to go. That simple.
Well, we covered it the other day. Didn't realise it was still going to be a big issue today.
Well, because she hasn't resigned, it's going to continue to be an issue. So
Okay.
politically, it's a problem.
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it doesn't. If she doesn't resign as an MP, I don't think it makes any difference to the fortunes of the SNP, though, does it?
No,
Which
but
is all that really matters.
it allows the opposition to attack the SNP groundlessly attack the SNP because they can't actually remove her from her position as an MP.
Well, I mean, I did. So who did I see this morning? I think it must have been Sky I watched. I found that watching, what's her name? Oh, the blonde girl in Sky. Anyway, on a Sunday morning, much more informative. She had on, she had Douglas Ross on. She must have had. She had Ian Murray on, just saying predictable things. I think it'll be, it'll be all over by next week.
Yeah, and I think that's due to the fact that the SNP have been so strident in their condemnation.
But
There's nowhere for any serious commentator to go apart from criticising Margaret Ferrier.
Right. So the First Minister clearly acted very decisively, as she has in the past for almost everyone except her husband. See, that's the trouble with this issue.
Now, Stuart, you're going to do it again. What is Peter Morrell guilty of?
Well, we don't know, but she's
exactly. So why does she have to act?
She suspended other people for very little.
What is Peter Morrell guilty of?
Oh, well, fair enough.
You look for a job at the Herald.
It gives the opposition a target.
Right. So innocence or guilt is not the issue here. It's whether you're a target.
Well, it's what the perception is, isn't it? That's what really matters.
Cool. Because I'm about to accuse you of outing all the alphabet women. So whether you're guilty or not, you have now become a target and should be thrown out of the SNP.
All right, fair enough. Off you go.
Well,
you better phone them up now.
Is guilt or innocence the reason you're thrown out of the party? Or is presumption of guilt a reason to be thrown out of the party?
I am not alone. Look at you.
Doesn't matter if you're alone. It matters whether there is a reason to throw him out the party.
Right. Don't shout me down. Mandy Rhodes, you flagged up an article by Mandy Rhodes, who runs Holyrood magazine, been a good friend of the SNP more over the last 15 or 20 years.
Oh, she should be. Her husband's standing as an MSP.
I didn't know that. She had a very interesting article about the situation with the SNP, the government, even the Crown Office, in regard of the inquiry into what happened with Alex Salmond's case. I won't go into the detail, but even she, I mean, everybody's asking what role has Peter Morrell had?
And I am in no way saying you have no right to ask questions. But what you actually said was, why is he still in the party? Why hasn't he been thrown out?
Oh, no, I didn't say thrown out, but why hadn't he at least been suspended? Everybody else, all these other people were, and some of them were quite clearly innocent. Minor infractions.
Sorry, these are the people that went through the process and were found not to be innocent of what they've been accused, that are now quite obviously innocent.
I'm thinking of Michelle Thompson. I'm thinking of the poor guy McDonald in Aberdeen, because all he did was retweet somebody's tweet and bang, he was out. Who else was there? Goodness me,
all of whom,
Grouse Peter, who's been a stalwart of the party and the movement for how many years?
All of whom went through due process. Now, there might be a problem with the process, but they went through the process. So until Peter Morrell has been had up in front of the NEC or whatever the process is, he's innocent.
So, but what does matter is, we're talking about Margaret Ferrier, and whether she should or should not resign her seat. Well, I can see she should resign her seat. Maybe she's just waiting to be offered another job. Maybe she really needs the money. She, maybe she's just, if she's a working class single woman for Glasgow, and she's got a job as an MP, she maybe needs the money. So somebody should offer some money, and then she'll resign.
It makes no difference. What she did was wrong. It wasn't. It was outrageously wrong and ill-judged. She should resign.
Okay, but we covered all this 2 days ago. Are you going to want to go on about it tomorrow as well?
I mean, I'm interested that you think because of her social standing, principles
she's been picked on.
Picked on? She's admitted, she's reported herself to the police and the Standards Committee at Westminster. She's admitted her guilt.
There's a million people in this country done worse on this issue than she has. They just haven't been found out.
She has been found out. She's an MP. I'm sorry. There is absolutely no defense of what she did.
Look, serious surveys have already shown that only 20% of people who are supposed to be self-isolating do so.
And how many of them are lawmakers?
Well, that is, of course, the reason why she's been suspended by the SNP.
So what? I mean,
well, how many of the 20% are policemen and court, lawyers and all the rest? We don't know.
No, we don't. But we do know Margaret Ferrier broke every rule in the book and is an MP.
But we do know that an awful lot of people are not doing what they're supposed to under these virus regulations.
So because I commit murder and it's been committed before, I should be let off. I'm sorry. She broke the rules. And even Dominic Cummings, by the way, wasn't an MP. He wasn't a lawmaker.
But he was making the rules.
Well,
and then ignoring the rules.
We presume he was. That's a presumption as well. You'd never make a lawyer, Stuart.
You shouldn't have brought up Margaret Ferrier.
Well, I'm very disappointed that she's taken so long to go. What else came up? Douglas Ross, or as we like to call him, DRoss.
Yes.
Made a speech to the Tory party.
He did indeed. And there's an aspect to that before we get to the content, of course, that it's a virtual conference. We had a virtual Labour conference the other week, and that was practically ignored. And apart from Keir Starmer's speech, and that was awkward. It was awkward to watch. I don't know why. Can you remember why that was awkward to watch?
It just didn't look comfortable. It looked like he was talking to an audience that wasn't there.
Yes, and he looked as though he was talking to an advisor that was just off camera. It was just weird. And we've also had the Lib Dem one. I didn't even notice that. Did you notice that one?
I don't think I saw a single clip. Oh, I think I might have seen Davy.
Yes,
Sir Davy.
So this is the third one. So if you throw it into the pot, we just heard on Friday that the SNP annual conference is going ahead on the 28th of November, and it's a 3-day virtual conference, which is actually, I was wondering, my goodness, what have we got to talk about for 3 days? Because I'm not.
Oh, I think there'll be a lot to talk about if it's allowed. If it's allowed into the discussion.
If it's allowed. It was just we've heard so little, even with well, we've heard more about the Tory conference this weekend, largely because the Prime Minister, we'll come to him in a minute, but has been going around the studios talking to regional TV and etc. Otherwise, you wouldn't know there was a Tory conference on. So DRoss made his speech. I'll let you describe what he said, Norrie.
Well, effectively, he accused the Tory party south of the border, the English Tories, of ignoring the constitutional question, not being as supportive as they need to be. Now, I'm surprised it came as a surprise because there's been a few polls in the last year saying that the Tories aren't really that bothered about losing Scotland as long as they get Brexit, nor are they bothered about losing Northern Ireland as long as they get Brexit. And I think it's beginning to dawn. Well, no, I don't. I'm putting too much intellect into DRoss, I think. I was about to say, I think it's beginning to dawn on Scottish Tories that the rest of their party in the rest of the United Kingdom do not give a fig about the Constitution. What I think they expect is for Boris Johnson to just refuse a second referendum. So it's far in the future as far as the Tories are concerned.
I'm going to ask you a simple question and then we can lead on from there. If Scotland leaves the Union because of this Brexit these Brexit maniacs or whatever they're called, and their obsession with English exceptionalism, will that be a major catastrophe for England?
It won't. It will be in the fullness of time. It won't be apparent, I don't think, on the street unless you live in Kent and have to get round a queue of lorries, or there are literally food shortages in the supermarkets. At that level, it might upset the population. But as far as the financial situation, it will be a slow burn.
So what about, is it a question of votes? Will it, Tory votes, which if you're a Tory in England and you're thinking about votes, which is going to be good for you, the Scotland staying or Scotland leaving?
That could become an issue if the social services are cut in England to cover the cost of Brexit stroke the pandemic. It could become a case of, why are we subsidising Scotland? Get rid of them. At which point the Conservative government in power will have to fess up and say, can he afford to get rid of them?
That was the word I was just thinking about, fessing up. One of these days that we're going to hit that Rubicon or whatever it is, and they're going to have to admit they don't actually subsidise Scotland at all.
Well, yes, I don't think they'll ever admit that. They can't afford to admit that. When Scotland I think it's one of the things that worries them. If Scotland becomes independent, it becomes obvious that there's a source of income disappearing over the horizon.
I think I made a brief reference to it.
The drop in the pound, the drop in GDP will be, well, they'll panic the markets.
Now, who was it? It doesn't matter who wrote the article, but there was an article I made a reference to the other day, which was about England and its colonies. Now, I'm thinking of all these tax havens.
It was Murphy. Was it
Murphy?
Not?
Could be. And to some extent, Scotland is in that category as well. It's a look. History has shown us that England has not hung on to any colonies if they were a drain.
The reality is Scotland isn't a colony only because Scots helped manage and run the colonies. So there's that strata of Scotland that believes that they are colonial masters, not the colonized. It always makes me think of what the Roman Empire did. They went into a country, they let them keep their religion, and they basically made deals with the local great and the good who continued to rule, but they used Rome's rules. And it was very successful for quite a long time. 300 or 400 years, in fact, I think.
You have historically, you have different empires. The Persian Empire, which came and went on for a long time, it, generally speaking, was regarded as successful because they very rarely interfered much. Once they'd taken over a country, they just said, let you get on with it. You be, but you're just part of our network. The Holy Roman Empire apparently was quite like that. And I'm not so sure about the Ottoman Empire.
Well, the thing about Scotland is there are a lot of Scots who partook in the running of the empire, who were in the politics. I mean, just look at the number of Scottish prime ministers we've had.
Yes, but
You
there's
know,
that. You're now making the argument for staying in the union.
no, I'm not making an argument for staying in the union. I'm making an observation that many of the people who make the argument for staying in the union have the mindset of a colonial master, not one of the colonized.
There is that aspect. You could say that's a little bit of the "wha's like us no money and there I did." There is that in Scotland.
Aye, and
Scottish exceptionalism. Yeah, we're not the downtrodden that you Nats think we are.
yeah, and it's kind of it's one of the things I agree with Peter Bell about, where it's a question of democracy for Scotland. I find it very difficult to look on Scotland as a colony. I always have. I would like Scotland to hold the reins of power, and one of the reasons I would like them to do that is responsibility. Stop using Westminster as an excuse. Force our political class to make decisions for the good of all, and make them stand on their own 2 feet. I mean, it's easy. If you remember the SNP, it is easy to use grievance as an excuse for your own failings. And it has ever been when a different party's in power at Westminster to Holyrood. Let's get responsible. Let's run our own affairs.
The only time I ever got the government that I voted for was when I lived in England.
I'm not going to ask you what you voted because you already admitted you voted Tory once.
But I've told you before, that was because it was the bourgeois revolution.
That was because at the time you were a Tory. You were doing it for your pocket, not the betterment of your fellow man.
I know. We were getting rid of the aristocracy. I joined the bourgeoisie to overthrow the aristocracy.
That's how that doesn't work.
That's how backwards some parts of England still are. They've not even had the bourgeois revolution yet.
Well, the bourgeoisie overthrow the aristocracy by becoming the aristocracy. We didn't touch on Peter Bell's piece about the Douglas Ross.
It's very interesting. I think we should flag it up and let people and advise people to go and read it. He suggests that it's a clever, a cunning plan, as Blackadder would say, by somebody that works for Dominic Cummings.
Well, Peter's theory is that this is Douglas Ross, or as I say in brackets, Dross. This is his way of distancing himself from number 10. I'm not sure anybody in the Tory party is smart enough. I think what they've done is they've looked at Ruth Davidson's track record and noticed her popularity started to peak when she said things that were not pleasant about London Tories. I think they're going to try that. Unfortunately for Dross, he votes at Westminster and he votes on the party whip every single time. And if there was a bill came into place shutting down Holyrood, he would vote for it.
But he gets away with it with the English media. He was getting away with it again this weekend. They don't really pick on him for that. Oh, they were referencing the fact that he resigned. This was today when he was on. The fact that he'd resigned over the Dominic Cummings Barnard Castle trip. And he waves that like a big flag when he's asked.
If you remember at the time, we discussed his resignation. And I can't remember which of it had the insight, but one of us pointed out that looked awful like a setup for him becoming next Scottish Tory leader. And lo and behold, what happened? He became next Scottish Tory leader. If you look at the timeline, it fits too well to be ignored.
It does. I mean, I've got to reference my sister, more or less said, he looks like a young man with ambition.
Ambition to be what?
Well, I have no idea, but
Leader of the Scottish Tories.
how many mistakes has he made compared to most of the
Well, I don't know.
likes?
Accusing your colleagues of not caring about Scotland. What was the other one he came out with? His new economic plan for Scottish business that basically went right against the internal market bill.
Oh yes, but that I mean, if you follow Peter Bell's argument, that's all part of the plan.
Well, I don't think it'll work.
It's to make him appear like he is treading a different path in Scotland.
But the mistake they're making is he isn't Ruth Davidson.
Well, not yet. Don't forget. In a way, he is. Ruth Davidson.
He can't make himself Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson had a career outside politics. She was and is a professional television presenter. She was before she became a politician, and still. So she turns up all the time, or used to anyway, on these quiz shows, these kind of random, lots of TV. He turns up. Well, he would not under normal circumstances. He turns up as a referee. I'm not quite sure if it's exactly the same, but it is a bit of a profile because apparently he used that this week to call a meeting, at which the SNP weren't invited, of senior football clubs to discuss plans that wouldn't please the SNP government in Scotland.
Well, somebody should have asked him, because he's another Four Nations following the same line, how we were supposed to introduce crowds at football matches when his boss, Boris, had no intention of introducing crowds at football matches. Because in that same speech, he banged on about a Four Nations approach.
What speech?
His Tory party conference speech.
Oh, did he? I didn't miss that. I missed that bit. But certainly, I had the meeting just at the end, a couple of days ago, with the football clubs, and it is stirring against the Scottish government.
His problem is going to be that people that watch him closely will mark the hypocrisy and the contradictions in everything he says, because I don't think there is a plan. Or if there is a plan, it lasts about 2.5 minutes. If the press choose to highlight his pronouncements individually without reference to his voting record or previous statements, or indeed Tory government policy, he'll get away with it in Scotland. But the nationalists, the Yes movement, will catch him out regularly because he just opens his mouth and lets his belly rumble. Okay. There's no thought goes into it.
So you don't see him as a potential, you don't think he's that ambitious after all?
Were you going to ask me if I saw him as a potential First Minister?
No.
Prime Minister.
That. Somebody suggested that, potential First Minister in an Tory First Minister in an independent Scotland.
Yeah, okay. Who was that?
I have no idea. Who was that?
Are you sure you weren't at the local mental institution when that happened?
I have no idea. I read a lot.
I mean, your sister's point about him being ambitious, I would have to say ambitious to go where? He's as high as he's ever getting. He's going no higher than branch manager of the Tory party in Scotland.
All right, but look at, he's already sidelined who? David Mundell and Ian, is it Ian? No, Alistair Jack. You know, suddenly it's all about DRoss, Douglas Ross. Alistair Jack doesn't seem, I mean, he's apparently, will there be a separate Tory party virtual conference at which point they'll wheel out Alistair Jack?
As a dedicated Marxist, you could have sidelined Alistair Jack and Mundell in the Tory party. Come on.
And what about the original plan that it would be Ruth Davidson would do all the high profile stuff? All she's doing is standing up in the chamber. She hasn't. Oh no, she was on telly the other night having a go at Margaret Ferrier at about
Yeah.
11 o'clock at night live.
She'll do some stuff, but they have to be really careful because she is much better at it than he is. It's that simple.
Well, it's a bit like what I said about Trump before he got ill, or if he did ill, when about the debate with Biden the other day. Trump's been, for the last 15 years, has been a professional television presenter, so he's never going to do that badly in a television debate. Same with Ruth; she's a professional television presenter,
No, and she's just got more personality than either Jackson Carlo or Douglas Ross. I mean, she's feisty. I've never ever criticized her presentation, just its content. She very rarely gets it wrong. And she has that way of coming back even more angry, which covers it up when Sturgeon gives her a kicking. Douglas Ross, I'll tell you, Douglas Ross can thank God he's not in Holyrood at the moment. Because if he was coming out with that crap, Sturgeon would hand him his head in a basket. No, she would. She'd take him apart, especially on his Westminster voting record. He's asking for meals for all school kids, breakfast and lunch, having voted against it for English school children at Westminster.
Well, yes, exactly. But all you keep saying, all you keep seeing or hearing is what he's saying, not the secondary message. The point is, he says it, and some people, potential voters, hear that and think, "Oh yes, all right." So he said that,
Yeah,
and then they forget about it. So, but when they come to vote, they go, "Oh, he's quite a nice guy after all. He wants free meals for the kids."
But that's the point I made earlier. It'll be up to how the press report this. If they report it as hypocritical, Dross votes against free meals for children at Westminster, but wants free meals for children in Scotland.
Yeah,
is he some sort of Scottish exceptionalist?
No, but I mean, if one paper does say that, the other 9 will say say, "Oh, they'll forget about it and leave the voters to vote."
And that has always been the strength. It's actually one of the reasons that there's a bunch of idiots running the Tory government at Westminster, and Douglas Ross, who is no intellectual giant, is in charge of the Scottish Tory party because the press do not attack them for their shortcomings.
I just wonder, you used an expression there, in charge of the Tory party. I wonder if he's actually in charge of, who's in charge of the Tory party in Scotland. I mean, we know it's London, really. He's just put up there as a spokesperson, really, isn't he?
Well,
I don't think he makes the decisions, does he?
It's a wee experiment for Dominic Cummings to see what he can spin.
Now we're getting closer to the reality, I think.
Well, I'm not even sure it is. I'm sorry. If anybody has written a plan, they haven't joined the dots, because he has contradicted himself in just about every time he opens his mouth. They're not thinking.
What's you're forgetting that the Tories, they don't just contradict themselves every time they open their mouths. They lie blatantly, and they get away with it day after day.
And you think that's because they planned it? I don't. I think they're reacting.
Sorry, that's what I think.
Well, is it a great plan
to lie every time they're getting away with it?
For Douglas Ross to start down the road of, aren't we nice Tories up here? We're not like Tories at Westminster. No, he'll come out with individual statements that, once you look at his wider actions, will prove to be lies.
I think that's wishful thinking on your part, Norrie, not reality.
What is?
That people will notice the contradiction.
I'll notice. I've said to you, I don't think the press will.
We notice the Tories lie when they open their mouths.
Yeah,
but does it make any difference?
I made the point earlier. It's dependent on our press.
Boris Johnson still has an amazing support as Prime Minister in England. It's ridiculous, but it's true.
Less than Keir Starmer now. Keir Starmer, I think, is on 49%. Well, doing your job well. Boris is on 44. Keir Starmer's on 49.
Well, here, presumably you do want to say something about Boris and Marr. I've only got one comment about Boris and Marr, which was, compared to what he was like on television yesterday, what the hell did they make him swallow before he went on telly this morning? Because he almost sounded sensible.
Well, when the person that's interrogating you tries to interrupt by saying, "Excuse me, do you mind if I interrupt?" You're kind of on an easy wicket, I would have said.
That's why I switched off. I thought, my God, I can't stand this.
Well, I watched it to the bitter end. And what surprised me was how lily-livered he was about saying there won't be a second referendum. Right at the end of the interview, he was asked about if the SNP have a landslide at Holyrood. And well, once in a generation, I don't think the time's right. No, I'm not going to give them another referendum.
But Marr didn't ask the obvious question if he was a foreign journalist and not a craven Scot in London. What gives you the right to refuse?
Exactly. And until the mainstream media start asking, isn't that anti-democratic? It will not become anti-democratic.
So we live in this world where it's all about perception, and then the media shape our perception. Yeah. We as commentators and activists can see through it, but 90% of the population don't.
They need to be told of its existence.
I nearly had an argument, an online argument with, I'm not going to mention any names, but it popped up the other day. Somebody was saying, there was a reference about da. What was that mean? It was about having to rebut rebuttals. And you don't need rebuttals, you've got the news, and you've got the BBC. And I made the mistake of just making a couple of comments, and they were all, they think, how dare you say the BBC is in the hands of oligarchs? And I was very careful with my words. Can't remember exactly what I used, but I made it clear I was talking about the influence that the oligarchs have through the Tory party and the editorials.
These people never have a problem with the mainstream media until their particular hobby horse gets omitted. Then all of a sudden it's a left wing, right wing, whatever side they're on.
Yeah, that was the kind of, it was one of those arguments. Oh, well, they're all criticizing it. It must be okay then. Oh yeah, you're right.
No, that Scotland Media Watch, 5 out of the 7 headline boxes on the BBC Scotland website were all about Margaret Ferrier. 5 of them.
It was worse than that. It was in the national newspaper. 7 out of 10 articles on the digital front page were about Margaret Ferrier.
That's why she should have gone on Friday.
Look back at Margaret Ferrier. Oh, the poor woman. She must be gone scatty by now.
Well, I presume she's lying in bed with a thermometer in her mouth. Anything else that you picked up on today?
I'd like to mention just briefly that there is an article in the New York Times about the virus, and what they're saying there is something that doesn't appear to be talked about in our media, which is not about testing. It's about contact tracing. And if in Taiwan, the typical number of people that get contacted if you are reported as having tested positive, in Taiwan, people come up with about 15 contacts. In Europe, it's somewhere about 2 or 3 each. And on top of that, we've got, as I say, it's worrying that it's a possibility that people in this country are not prepared to fess up to how many people they have actually been in contact with. They don't want to put people, if I've mentioned so-and-so and he's my boss, he's not going to like me. He's going to give me a rocket on Monday when I go in, because I've told them I spent a lot of time with them
You
in the
shouldn't
pub.
be going in on Monday, mate. You should be self-isolating for 14
Yeah,
days.
well, all this, but you know what I mean. A lot of people, because we've a different culture in Europe, a lot of people are not fessing up to the contacts that they've actually got.
Okay, I haven't read the article. I am going to read the article because the minutiae of this information is important.
Yep.
The definition of contact in whichever country this applies to is important. As far as I understand here, it's within 2 meters for more than 15 minutes. So a lot of people who you meet will not be classed as contacts by track and trace.
Not unless you were in the company of Donald Trump. Apparently makes sure that you get infected.
Well, my point here is, until I read the article and see the minutiae, I'm not sure that the case they're making is sound.
It's not an issue. I'm saying it's not an issue that's even been mentioned here, and I think it's possibly worthwhile looking into it a bit more in more detail.
I think, and I'll have to go on back onto the Scottish Government website, because I think there's a case to explain what a contact is. How do you become a traceable contact? Because I think people need to understand that. And I think it should be pinned on the forehead of Alex Douglas Cole, especially.
Why?
Because he obviously doesn't understand it. Well, actually, every Liberal Democrat in the Parliament and every MP that stands up to ask a question on trace and protect in Scotland should have to recite what constitutes a contact before they're allowed to ask the question.
Where is that one? Where's the quote here? What was it? Raging mistrust. This is the quote from that article. Raging mistrust in the government, and obviously a thicket of conspiracy theories about the virus spread. Fear of plunging themselves or their friends into a painful period off work. Infected patients have handed over a paltry number of contacts and often flouted self-isolation rules. Contact tracers are struggling to reach people who test positive and being rebuffed once they do. That's a quote from it.
And that applies to the UK.
I think it's more European rather than the specific, although they're based in London, these people, I think.
The other thing I wanted to mention goes back to the Boris Johnson interview with Marr. Boris wants you to go out fearlessly while using your common sense.
Well, we're back on common sense, so they can blame the people for everything going wrong again.
The problem with what he's asking you to do is to be fearless while using your common sense. One is risk averse and the other is risk based. So you go out fearlessly and use your common sense for your walk. So you fearlessly avoid getting within 2 meters of anybody's shirt. The guy just sows confusion.
Absolutely.
That's his problem. He just sows confusion.
There was, I think I'm glad I watched Sky this morning. Who else was on? Andy Burnham was on, the Labour. He's a good communicator, isn't he? The Labour mayor of Greater Manchester. And he was on this morning and they were discussing the complications of it's become, all the restrictions, they're now become so localized, especially in the north of England, you know, that people don't know from one street to the other what the rules are.
I think there's an argument, if you like, almost to have a red, amber and green lockdown.
I think they're talking about levels. Yes,
yeah.
I think that's how they work it in Ireland. They've got levels so that they have these different levels of restrictions, and you should know what level. They tell you what level you're in according to your postcode.
Yeah. And that, I think I think that's inevitable. If they're going to do it locally, you kind of have to say Gala's on level 4, Hoyks on level 3.
And this is the trouble. They've got instead of having straightforward levels and or bands or whatever you call it, they make up different restrictions for each postcode. You can have 20 for your funeral in one town and 30 in another. And what does the rule of 6 mean? It depends what village you're in.
By the same token, like the councillors in Aberdeen, they want it to be as local as possible. And they're asking to be able to make that decision themselves. And there's part of me thinks, especially Aberdeen, it should be handed to Aberdeen Council so that when it goes hugely tits up and they come asking for government help, the government can say, no.
Aberdeen Council are the least likely council to get it wrong, because apparently they won the Council of the Year award.
What?
So I read yesterday.
Who issues the award?
Good question.
Aberdeen Council. Unbelievable. I hope it was the guy whose father sold an embankment to the council for 10 times what it's worth, or didn't sell it, won't sell it, so they can't make a pavement safe. Something like that. Anyway, I've run out of stuff, Stuart. What about you?
I've run out of time, Nori.
Time is, oh God,
well, and I'm going out there. It's dry. I'm going out there to get a walk. Well, I'm just going to get a walk before it rains again. The rain's still somewhere around.
We'll call it a day at that then, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, Stuart, for being on. We'll let you know what's happened to Jimmy. He might be wandering in the wilderness with his hangover. And thanks for listening, folks. And we'll catch you all tomorrow.
Cheerio.
Cheers for now.